Welcome to another deep dive. Today we'll be exploring plant morphology and anatomy, all thanks to these biology textbook excerpts you sent us. We're going to uncover some pretty amazing secrets behind how plants are structured.
And just think about how much we can actually learn about a plant just from how it looks.
Yeah.
Both the outside and the inside. It's like we can translate their secret language.
Yeah.
That tells us all about how they've changed through history, how they fit into their environment, and how they actually, function on a physiological level.
It's like we have X-ray vision for plants.
Exactly.
So where do we start?
Well, first, I think it would be helpful to go back in time and look at how those early biologists began studying plants.
Yeah.
So way before experimental biology became a thing, naturalists, they relied heavily on really detailed observation and descriptions. They're very meticulous, like detectives, just cataloging every single detail of a plant's features, both externally and internally.
It's so interesting to think that those detailed descriptions formed the basis of everything we know now about plant science.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the ones who laid the foundation for how we understand how plants function and evolve. They were like the building blocks for future scientists to delve deeper.
Yeah. Speaking of pioneers, I think we need to talk about Catherine Esau.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Catherine Esau, she was a giant in plant anatomy. Her research and her groundbreaking work, especially with plant viruses and anatomy, really changed how we understand plants. I mean, even today, her textbook, Plant Anatomy, is like the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
It's a classic for botanists today.
I love that even at 99, she was still actively engaged in the field.
I know.
Just, absolutely dominating it, as Peter Raven said. It really shows her passion and dedication.
Yeah, it shows that lifelong pursuit of knowledge. And just that genuine fascination with the natural world can really lead to remarkable achievements.
Yeah.
No matter what field you're in.
So true. So with that historical context, let's shift our focus to the basic structure of flowering plants. So we all know that plants have roots, stems, and leaves, but I think there's so much more to it than meets the eye.
You're absolutely right. No matter how different plants might look, they all share this fundamental structure.
Okay.
Understanding these specific terms and definitions, that's the key to unlocking the secrets of plant anatomy.
Okay.
Should we start with roots?
Yeah, let's delve into the underground.
All right, so first off, roots aren't these simple structures. There are lots of different types.
Oh, okay.
Each with its own unique characteristics and functions and adaptations to their environment. It's like they each have their own survival toolkit.
Okay.
We have tap roots, those are like in mustard plants, with one dominant root that grows deep down into the soil.
Okay.
It really anchors the plant and gives it access to water sources deep below the surface.
So like a really strong anchor.
Exactly. And then there are fibrous roots, like what you find in wheat. And those create like this dense network that's really good for absorbing all those nutrients and water from the topsoil.
Oh, okay. And then the more adventurous roots. But adventitious roots that seem to just pop up anywhere.
Yes. So those are the ones that you might see growing down from branches, like on a banyan tree, providing extra support and anchoring them to the ground. They can even sprout from stems or leaves.
Wow. So no matter what type of root, what's the core purpose of a root system?
Well, roots are truly the unsung heroes of plants. They do so much. They absorb the water and the minerals from the soil, providing those essential nutrients. They anchor the plant firmly, so it can withstand wind and water.
It's like the foundation of a house.
Exactly, providing stability and nourishment. And they also store food reserves, particularly carbohydrates.
That's their pantry.
Exactly. That the plant can then use later when things get a little tough. And here's a cool fact. Roots also synthesize plant growth regulators.
Remember those?
So those are like chemical messengers.
Okay.
They help the plant develop everything from the root growth to flowering.
Wow.
So they wear many hats.
They're like the superheroes of the plant world.
Exactly. They're essential for survival and play a much more dynamic role than we might initially realize.
Yeah.
Should we look closer at the structure of a single root?
Yes, close up, please.
Okay. So if we look at a root in cross-section, it's not just this uniform mass of cells. It actually has distinct regions. Each one has its own specialized job in the root's growth.
Okay, so break it down for me.
Think of it like a well-coordinated team, and each member has a specific job. So at the very tip of the root, you have what's called the root cap.
Okay.
This is like a little protective shield.
Okay.
It covers the delicate growing point of the root as it pushes through the soil. It's like a little helmet.
Exactly. It's like a little helmet protecting it from damage.
Yeah.
It also secretes this slimy substance
Right.
that helps lubricate the soil,
Okay.
making it easier to penetrate.
Smart. And what lies just beneath that shield?
Just behind the root cap, you have the region of meristematic activity.
What?
It's a zone of rapid cell division. New cells are constantly being made here. This is where the root actually grows in length.
So that's the root's growth engine.
Exactly. And as these new cells are made, they push those older cells upward, and this creates a region of elongation
Okay.
where the cells stretch and grow, extending the root further into the soil.
So the root's growing from the tip
Yes.
with the youngest cells at the bottom.
Exactly. And at the very top, you have the oldest.
Okay.
And finally, there's the region of maturation.
Hmm.
Here, the cells differentiate and take on their specialized roles.
Okay.
They become the different tissues that make up the mature root.
Right.
This includes things like the vascular tissues.
For transport and the protective outer layers.
So it's like a cellular assembly line.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And in this region of maturation is where we find those really important root hairs.
Root hairs, aren't those just the little fuzzies on the roots?
Well, they might seem insignificant,
Yeah.
but they're really crucial for survival.
Okay.
They're these delicate thread-like extensions of the root's epidermal cells,
Okay.
and they increase the root's surface area, making it way more efficient at absorbing water and dissolved minerals.
Oh, so they're like little tiny straws.
Exactly. Little straws sucking up all that good stuff.
Yeah.
They create this vast network of these microscopic pipelines,
Okay.
connecting the plant to those resources in the soil.
Right.
Plants would have a really tough time without them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So we've talked about roots, the anchors of plants. What about the part above ground, the stems?
Okay, so stems, those are like the backbone. They provide the support and structure for everything above ground. Branches, leaves, flowers, and even fruits.
Okay.
They're responsible for keeping the plant upright, allowing it to reach for that sunlight
Okay.
and to display its leaves in the best way to photosynthesize.
You can easily tell a stem from a root just by looking.
Oh, absolutely. One of the key features of a stem, you'll see nodes and internodes.
Nodes.
Nodes are the points on the stem where leaves arise.
Oh, okay.
Internodes are those spaces between the nodes.
Okay, so it's like they're all stacked up like building blocks.
Yeah, precisely. Stems usually bear buds too.
Right.
They can be at the tip or terminal or in the junction between a leaf and a stem, which we call axillary.
Right.
These buds have those undeveloped tissues that can grow into new shoots, leaves, or even flowers.
So they're always planning ahead.
Yeah, they're ready to branch out and explore.
Wow. Okay, so stems are often green when they're young, and they can do some photosynthesis, but they turn woody and darker as they age.
Right, which gives additional support and protection.
Like the trunk of a tree.
Exactly.
But what else does the stem do besides just, standing there?
Well, stems are quite busy.
Okay.
They have a few vital functions. First, they provide support for all those branches, leaves, and flowers and fruits. They're the scaffold, helping the plant reach the sunlight.
So they're like the strategic architects of the plant's growth.
Yes, exactly. And stems also work as a transport system.
Oh.
They conduct water and minerals absorbed by the roots up to those leaves for photosynthesis.
Okay.
And then they carry the sugars produced during photosynthesis back down to the other parts of the plant.
So it's like a highway system within the plant.
Precisely. And sometimes stems are even in charge of storage, storing extra food reserves like starch.
Okay.
Or they can help protect against herbivores with thorns.
Right.
So they really are multifunctional, providing support, transportation, storage, and even defense.
Amazing. And how about those powerhouses of photosynthesis, the leaves?
Ah, leaves, the solar panels of the plant world.
Right.
Capturing that sunlight and turning it into energy.
Right.
Typically, they're lateral, flattened structures emerging from the stem at the nodes, each one with a bud in its axil, ready to potentially grow into a branch.
So are leaves born fully formed? Or is there a process to how they develop?
Well, like most plant structures, leaves also go through a developmental journey.
Okay.
So they start at the shoot apical meristem, that actively growing tip of the stem.
Okay.
They emerge in an acropetal order, meaning from the base to the tip.
Oh, so the youngest leaves are at the top.
Exactly. closest to the shoot apical merit.
Then the oldest are at the bottom.
Exactly. It's like the plant is building itself upwards, adding new leaves as it grows.
That's cool. And how is a typical leaf structured? What are the key components?
A typical leaf has three main parts.
Okay.
The leaf base, the petiole, and the lamina.
Pop quiz time. What does each part do?
I knew you were paying attention. So the leaf base is where the leaf attaches to the stem.
Okay.
Sometimes it has these little leaf-like structures called sticules,
Right.
which can protect the developing bud or even help with photosynthesis.
So like in grasses, is that the wrap around the base?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
A specialized leaf base.
Cool.
Next, you have the petiole, which is
Okay.
like the leaf stalk,
Okay.
supporting the leaf blade, letting it move in the wind, which is good for cooling and brings fresh air to the surface.
Oh, okay. So it's like a flexible arm.
Precisely.
Mhm.
And lastly, the lamina, or leaf blade,
Okay.
the main expanded part where all the photosynthesis magic happens.
Right.
It's usually thin and flat, get the most sunlight, and it has veins and veinlets throughout.
Those are the leaf's circulatory system.
Exactly. The veins give structural support so the leaf doesn't wilt, but they also transport water and minerals
Mhm.
from the roots to the cells,
Right.
and they carry the sugars from photosynthesis to the rest of the plant.
So it's like a miniature highway system.
It is.
Yeah.
And the diversity in leaf shape, the margins, the apexes, the surfaces, it all reflects how plants have adapted to all sorts of environment.
That makes me want to examine every leaf I see now.
I know. It's fascinating.
But can we go back to the venation patterns for a second? I'm
Yeah.
curious about the different arrangements.
Sure. Venation refers to how the veins and veinlets are arranged.
Mm-hmm.
The two main types are reticulate and parallel.
Okay.
Reticulate is typical in dicots.
Okay.
That's where you see this network of veins
Okay.
branching out from a central midrib, almost like a tapestry.
So like a web almost.
Exactly. This type of venation is great for transporting water and nutrients all over, and it helps support their larger size and shape.
Okay, and parallel.
Parallel venation is more common in monocots.
Right.
And here, the veins run parallel to each other,
Okay.
like lines on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So from the base to the tip.
Okay.
While not as intricate,
Right.
it's perfect for those long, narrow leaves that you see in things like grasses and lilies.
So you can use the venation to figure out if it's the dicot or a monocot.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, what about the overall leaf structure? Are all leaves the same?
Not quite. Leaves can be simple or compound, depending on how deeply the lamina, the leaf blade, is divided.
Okay.
A simple leaf just has a single undivided blade, even if it's lobed or has teeth.
So it can have indentations, but the blade's still continuous.
Exactly, like a maple leaf or an oak leaf. Those are both simple leaves.
Okay.
But a compound leaf, its blade is divided into multiple leaflets.
So how can you tell if it's a leaflet or just a small leaf?
Great question. One key difference is a bud. You'll see a bud in the axil, that angle between the leaf and the stem,
Right.
on a simple leaf, but not on a leaflet.
Oh, that makes sense.
So if there's a bud,
It's a leaf.
exactly, and no bud, it's a leaflet.
Got it. I've noticed that the leaves aren't just randomly placed on a stem.
You're right, there's a pattern.
Is there a term for that?
Yeah, it's called phyllotaxy. It refers to the arrangement of leaves on the stem. And usually it's one of three types: alternate, opposite, or whorled.
Okay. Pop quiz time again. Tell me about these different types.
All right, in alternate phyllotaxy, a single leaf grows at each node,
Okay.
alternating sides as you move up the stem.
Yeah.
Think of a China rose, or a mustard plant, or a sunflower.
So they kind of spiral up the stem.
Exactly, like a spiral staircase.
Cool.
That way, each leaf gets as much sunlight as possible without shading the ones below.
Makes sense. And opposite.
Opposite phyllotaxy, you get a pair of leaves at each node.
Mm-hmm.
They're directly across from each other,
Okay.
like in calotropis or guava plants.
So it's very symmetrical.
Yes, exactly. And this helps to balance the weight of the leaves,
Oh, that makes sense.
so it doesn't become top-heavy.
And whorled.
Whorled phyllotaxy is where you have more than two leaves at a node.
Okay.
They form this, circular arrangement and whorl, like what you see in Alstonia.
It's like a huddle of leaves.
It is a leaf huddle. And this arrangement, like the others, also helps with light capture and making sure each leaf gets enough sunlight.
It's incredible how plants have all these arrangements figured out to maximize their energy.
I know. It's amazing how efficient and adaptable they are, ensuring their survival, even as their environment changes.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we were talking about leaves and how they're arranged. Now let's talk about what keeps plant life going. flowers.
Flowers, they're so captivating,
Yes.
like nature's fireworks. But underneath all that beauty, they're actually really complex.
They really are. Flowers are like modified shoots where the shoot apical meristem, that busy tip of the stem, changes and becomes a floral meristem. And this is dedicated to making all these intricate structures for sexual reproduction.
So it's like a stem gets a makeover and trades its leaves for flowers.
That's one way to put it. And this transformation happens because of genes and environmental cues, which lead to those specialized floral structures. Ready to dive into those details?
Yes, tell me more.
Okay, so a typical flower has 4 different kinds of whorls.
Okay.
They're arranged in a specific order on a swollen end of the stalk. We call it the thalamus or the receptacle.
Okay.
These whorls are the calyx, the corolla, the androecium, and the gynoecium.
Wow, okay. Maybe we can break down each of those floral whorls.
Absolutely. Let's start with the calyx, the outermost whorl.
Okay.
It's made up of sepals, which are usually green and leaf-like, and they protect the flower when it's still a bud. Think of them as the flower's guardians.
Okay, so like a flower's armor.
Exactly. And sepals, just like leaves, they can be arranged and fused in different ways. They can be free or polysepalous or fused together or gamasepalous.
Okay, so the next whorl is the corolla with the petals.
You got it. The corolla is all those colorful, fragrant petals that attract pollinators.
It's amazing how plants do that.
I know, it's like they're advertising themselves.
Yeah.
Come and visit and please take my pollen.
Right. So the petals are more than just beauty.
Absolutely. And they have lots of variations, just like sepals. They can be free, polypetalous, or fused together, gamopetalous. And that forms like a tube or a funnel shape. That helps guide pollinators to get to the nectar and pollen inside.
Wow. Okay, and what about the actual reproductive parts?
All right, that brings us to the androecium and the gynoecium.
Okay.
Those are the male and female reproductive parts.
Okay.
The androecium is made up of stamens,
Okay.
which produce the pollen. Each stamen has a filament, that's the stalk, and the anther, which is where those pollen sacs are.
So the stamen is like the flower's male reproductive organ.
Exactly. It releases those pollen grains with the plant's genetic material.
Cool.
And stamens can be all different sizes and arrangements. Some flowers have a ton, some have just a few.
It's like each flower has its own fingerprint.
Exactly. Now for the gynoecium,
Okay.
that's the female reproductive part. It's made up of 1 or more carpels.
Carpels.
Yes, so each carpel has a stigma, which is sticky and receives the pollen. A style, which is the stalk that connects the stigma to the ovary,
Okay.
and the ovary itself, which holds those ovules that eventually become seeds.
So the carpel is like a protective container for potential seeds.
Exactly, a miniature vessel. The stigma is like the landing pad, the style is the pathway, and the ovary is the safe haven.
Amazing. Each part is important.
Yeah, and just like those other floral parts, carpels can have variation too.
Oh, okay.
Some flowers have free carpels, called apocarpus,
Okay.
and some have fused carpels, called syncarpus,
Okay.
creating one structure. And how those ovules are arranged within the ovary, that's called placentation.
Okay. And how does that work?
Placentation is all about how those ovules are attached to the inside of the ovary.
Okay.
There are so many different types,
Right.
and each one has its own evolutionary history.
Yeah.
It's like each plant has its own way of arranging its ovules.
So is there a reason for all those different types?
That's a good question. There's still debate on the specific advantages,
Oh,
but we
sure.
think it comes down to how many ovules are produced,
Okay.
how well pollination happens, and how seeds are spread.
So nature's always experimenting.
Yes, always. The diversity in placentation shows how incredibly adaptable plants are. They really fine-tune how they reproduce to fit what they need.
It's like watching a miniature factory.
It is, and we haven't even gotten to fruits and seeds.
I know. Can't wait to learn more about those.
Okay, but before we do that, maybe a quick recap of the floral whorls.
Yeah. Okay. I think that would be helpful.
Remember, those 4 whorls, the calyx, the corolla, the androecium, and the gynoecium,
Right.
they're the basic parts of a flower, and each one has a specific role in how the plant reproduces.
And there's so much variation.
Tons of variation in the fusion of sepals and petals and how many stamens and carpels.
Yeah.
It's like each flower is unique.
So unique.
And those variations tell us about the plant's history and how it's adapted to its pollinators or environment.
Okay.
Like flowers pollinated by hummingbirds, they usually have long corollas that match the hummingbird's beak. And flowers pollinated by wind,
Yeah.
they often have smaller or even no petals. They rely on the wind.
So each flower is shaped by natural selection.
Exactly. So by understanding those floral parts, we can learn so much.
Yeah.
It's like deciphering their language.
This is incredible. It's like we're cracking a secret code.
It is. We can start to see the beauty and complexity of flowers, not just for their looks,
Right.
but also as these amazing biological marvels.
Yeah. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone from the roots all the way up to the flowers.
And to kind of bring all these ideas together, I thought we could focus on one specific family, the Solanaceae family. It really shows how powerful it can be to understand plant structure.
The Solanaceae, the nightshade family. You mentioned them before as a good example for how those flower structures help us classify plants.
Yeah.
What makes them so special?
Well, they're so diverse. They've got everything from herbs like black nightshade to trees like corkwood. But even though they look so different, they have these shared characteristics that link them together, like family.
So what are the signs that tell us a plant's part of the Solanaceae family?
Let's start with what we call the vegetative characters. The parts that aren't involved in reproduction. Most Solanaceae plants are herbaceous, so they don't have woody stems, though there are a few exceptions. Their stems are usually aerial, they stand upright, cylindrical, and they branch out in a way that reminds me of a candelabra.
Like a botanical chandelier.
Exactly. And their leaves, they're usually alternate, so one at each node, and simple, so no leaflets. And their veins are reticulate, that network pattern we talked about.
So even without flowers, you can get some clues.
Oh, yeah. But the real giveaway is in the flowers.
Okay, let's talk about Solanaceae flowers. What makes them stand out?
Well, they're typically bisexual, so they have both male and female parts. And they have radial symmetry, actinomorphy, with those floral parts arranged like spokes on a wheel.
So everything's nice and balanced.
Pretty much. Though in such a big family, there's always some variation. Now, their calyx, those sepals, usually has 5 that are fused together. We call that gamocephalous, and they're persistent.
Persistent.
Yeah, so they stay attached even when the fruit grows.
So like on a tomato, those little green leafy bits.
Exactly.
I never knew that.
It's a small thing, but it's a classic Solanaceae trait. Now, the corolla with the petals is also usually 5 petals that are fused. Gamopetalous.
So both the calyx and corolla are fused together.
Exactly. They make those cup-like structures. And the corolla, its shape and color, it can be so different in the family because of how they're pollinated. Some have bright corollas for insects, while others are more subtle and rely on wind or even self-pollination.
So they've adapted their designs.
Exactly. Okay, and what about the stamens?
Yeah, the pollen guys.
In Solanaceae flowers, the stamens are attached to the petals. We call that epipetalous. They're usually 5 to match the petals. And their filaments, the stalks, can be all different lengths, sometimes even sticking out past the corolla.
So they're in prime position to spread that pollen.
Exactly. Now for the gynoecium. Solanaceae flowers usually have 2 carpels fused together, so a syncarpous ovary. And importantly, it's a superior ovary, sitting above where the other parts are attached.
So it's protected by all those fused structures.
Yeah, like a crown jewel. And after fertilization, this ovary turns into the fruit. And in the Solanaceae family, there are so many different kinds of fruit.
Okay, let's hear about those fruits.
We're talking tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, even potatoes.
Wait, potatoes are fruits?
Botanically, yes.
Wow, I had no idea.
It all comes back to that ovary developing into a fruit.
Right.
And these fruits, along with other parts of Solanaceae plants, they've been so important to us. Food, spices, medicines, even tobacco.
Wow, that's a huge impact from just one family.
I know. And it really shows how understanding plant structure and classification is so important. By knowing the shared traits of Solanaceae, we can understand how they grow, how we can use them, and even their potential dangers. Some of them, like belladonna, are poisonous.
So this knowledge is helpful beyond just the science.
Absolutely. It helps us make better decisions about the plants we use every day. From what we eat to what we grow.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I see plants in a whole new way.
And that's just the beginning. There's so much more to learn about them. From their DNA to how they interact with their environment.
I feel so inspired to keep exploring.
Me too. But for today, I think that's a good place to stop.
I agree.
To our listeners, think about its structure, its history. Take a moment to really look at it. Yeah. Think about its structure, its history, how
Right.
important it is to all of us.
I love that.
You might be amazed by what you find.
And never stop being curious. Who knows what you might discover? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into plants.
Yes, thank you. There's so much to explore.
Until next time, keep learning and keep wondering.